Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, Outrank in Organic Search with these 5 core tactics, presented by Strategic SEO Solutions and Search Engine Land. Before we begin, if you have any technical issues or audio issues, click the audio icon on your screen to enable your audio. If you have any viewing issues, you can use the Q&A section at any time to communicate with us. You can send questions directly to the speaker about his presentation at any time. Joining us today is John Lightfoot, founder and CEO of Strategic SEO Solutions. Welcome, John. It's good to see you again, and I will turn things over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining me in this webinar for the first time. A pleasure to have you meet your acquaintance. Those that were with me in the webinar earlier this year, thank you for coming back, and I'm looking forward to chatting through today's webinar. So, my name is John Lightfoot, founder and CEO of Strategic SEO Solutions. SEO is really all that we do. We live, sleep, eat, breathe SEO. And today, there's a number of things that I'd like to talk about with you today that I think is going to be very, very healthy and impactful for your businesses as it relates to outranking, outperforming within organic search. So the agenda for today, there's a bit up on deck here. We've got driving SEO success via user intent. Revving up this notion of qualitative content, not quantitative, and also EAT and harnessing that and link acquisition to drive YMYL success. Now, if you're not familiar with some of that terminology, no worries. We're certainly going to break it down. This and also the simple secret: tuning up your consistency and going from 0 to 60 with Cohesion. So, with that said, and without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. There's a bit to go over today, so I'd like to harness our time effectively. So starting out, driving SEO success via user intent. I just want to take a quick pause here to say SEO success. A lot of times when we think about success, we think about, well, that means ranking top of first page Google. And true, there's a lot of success to be had in ranking in those top positions. But beyond ranking, there's something a little bit more, which is ranking for the right keywords. Let's take as an example a query such as just simply like house painting. A user inputs house painting. There's a lot of possibilities that could circulate around the catalyst to injecting a search like that. For example, they could be looking for a company to paint their house. And so if you are a company that offers house painting services, well, ranking at the top of Google for house painting, well, that could be transactional and a win for your company. But they could be looking for instructions on how to paint a house. They could be looking for paintings, like pictures that you would hang in your house of a house, house paintings, right? And they could be looking for an artist who might render a painting of their house. The point being here is that it's not just about ranking, it's about ranking for the right keywords and maybe even intersecting, of course, within the journey they're in. So let's get into, when we think about intent, what are the types of intent that we should be mindful of? First of all, intent really is the purpose behind the search. Okay, so there's four buckets that are really important to understand, to nurture, and to have as cohesion within your strategy. So we think about investigative, this kind of informational intent. There's also navigational, commercial, transactional. Those are the four that I want to focus on today, and I'm actually going to break them down to understand better not only what they are, but how to serve to them. How can we harness this to propel not only visibility within search, but our branding and our awareness and all of the things that we want to back into KPIs. So let's start off with this informational intent. And when I think about the why, what I'm really thinking about is, why would somebody utilize that type of search term? Well, why are those queries important? And really what we think about from an informational intent perspective is, the query is stemming from the fact that the user has a very specific question, right? So oftentimes they're looking for simple factual answers. And what's most important about this informational intent is that they're most commonly used. Like, these are the most common queries. So there's a tremendous amount of volume to serve to here. So it's definitely something that we should be mindful of. If we are mindful of this, if we do from an SEO perspective serve to informational intent content, if we serve that up, there's also this great opportunity to kind of rank position 0, you know. And so that means this rich snippet and actually coming up, and that provides a lot of thought leadership as well. So we understand kind of the why for informational, but what about the how? And the how for me means, so how do we really harness this and utilize this as a way that's effective for our companies? Well, you know, it's probably not surprising that the first step is to perform keyword analysis. The epicenter of this is understanding the types of information that people want to receive for that type of query, so that you can then create the type of content that serve those answers. It's also important that you really structure the information properly from the top down, literally starting from the top. And that would mean, you know, like your header tags, right? Your title, description, and your H1, your H2, like top down, and, you know, nurturing this in a way, because it's essentially bifurcated, meaning we have this notion of, well, how do we best serve the users and those that are really digesting this information, but also how do we help Google understand that we can best serve those users? And so that's going to be structural, and we want to perform keyword analysis. So, and then have cohesion there. So the other segment that you really want to think through is navigational intent. So why? Why are people using navigational intent keywords? Because they're trying to find a website, or maybe a web page, or a business, even a physical address. Navigational intent is for people who already know what they're looking for, but they need to find it still. They know what they want. Now they need to know where is it, right? So oftentimes this could be branded, and you can get a sense of some of the real estate options that are here and visible from, you know, kind of the information about the company and the phone number and things of this nature, to the website itself, and even knowledge graphs and panels and things. So that's what they're looking for, and we need to help them find it. We want to make sure that if they're looking for your brand, they can find your brand. So how do you do that? Well, this again here, the site structure is critical. It should be easy to navigate, not just for you, but for Google as well. It needs to be organized, right? And each page of the website really has to be dedicated to containing relevant information that would be cohesive from the title and the description, but through the H1, and make it really easy for the crawlers to be able to locate your company and serve it up as that result. You want to optimize your URLs with a keyword, and for those who are, you know, kind of SEO students, as it were, those who've been following along, we know the keyword in the URL isn't necessarily a major ranking factor, but what it does bring is context and relevance, and it just helps bolt everything together. Another consideration here, by the way, and I'll chat about this a little bit later too, is the NAP, the NAP, right? The name, address, phone number. You really want to have your NAP clear, present, and you need it to be consistent. That's almost your source of truth. It should propagate and filter through to all the citations and directories as well. All right, commercial intent. Now, here we start going a bit deeper in the funnel. So we're kind of that mid funnel. This is for users who are eventually going to make a purchase. It's almost transactional, but now they're getting deeper in that granular research phase. Okay, these types of queries are often related to comparison of products, or maybe value proposition, like really getting into comparing and understanding, trying to make that best decision they can, right? So they can make a purchase. And the right way to optimize for that is to start studying and really getting your arms around that PAA, which is this people also ask segmentation of what's served within the search results. That's directional. It'll give you indicators and help you understand what not only the primary questions, but what are some of the semantic ancillary secondary questions and things that people are really looking for. Competitive analysis here, again, very, very important. I mean, that in and of itself could be a full secondary topic matter webinar, but competitive analysis not only helps us understand what's working, it helps us understand what isn't. And therefore we can be most effective with our efforts because we're focusing on areas that have been proven effective. And so you want to structure pages and content to speak to that. You want to make sure that the most important information is prominent. I can't tell you how many times in kind of on-page site audits and analysis I've seen where clear value propositions, answers to questions like that clean FAQ, even some of the best assets are farther down the page, if not near or at the footer. But the truth is, as we all know, and if we study the CRO segmentation, this conversion rate optimization segmentation, what we're finding is that users don't always make it to the bottom of the page. And if we think about it from the segmentation of Google, they will give stronger credibility to the segments of content that are further up the page. It does have a dilution kind of segmentation to it as we start to get further down or near the bottom, because they would assume that the things that are most important as well, we're going to make prominent. So it's something you want to think about. You do want to think about providing the value prop assets to support the data. So for example, if you have, and you should, if you're using video on your website in some capacity, there's also video schema. And that would bolt onto that and really help against SERPs to not only serve the page up and build the context out, but even in different ways within search results. And there's featured snippets that are important as well. And it's very important that you do optimize your page with engaging titles, descriptions, headers. And I want to look at that a little bit more here in just a minute. Okay, transactional, right? These are the money keywords. These are individuals looking to make a transaction. These are the best opportunity for you. Very, very important that you understand transactional intent and that you serve to it. Some ways to do that is to begin to build content that supports kind of these appendages, meaning these words bolted on to before or after, the prefix, etc., for deals, coupons, and people that are looking for very transactional keywords. You want to be able to serve content that nurtures this. And I'm going to give you kind of a cheat sheet in just a moment around what are some of those appendages that you really should think about for all of these intent buckets. But implementing transactional keywords throughout heading tags, throughout the web pages, it's just really important that it's very clean crawl Google, but understand. I'm going to come back on this in just 1 second here. First, I just want to say this: when you're thinking about the intent buckets, right, and you're starting to ideate things like, well, how do we create web pages? How do we create blogs? What should we be doing to really nurture those different segments? Think about it this way: use the search queries as a lens into intent. So starting with the terms, the queries, the keywords, right? Start foundationally there to think about what type of content would be built to support it. But doing this, you want to also think about it in that funnel staged approach. How do we nurture this informational kind of discovery, top of funnel all the way through the mid and bottom funnel for the transactional keywords, and build content that nurtures those funnels with a dotted line back to intent. And so this way you could broaden your reach through those funnels. And then you can also be creating content that people actually want, because what they've searched for, it's more than just ranking at the top. It's making sure that when they come, they find what they're looking for and send quality signals back to Google that they've remained on the page and they're finding good information, they're not bouncing, etc. And so, I think pages optimized for user intent are always going to perform best. So you want to think about that. Now, I promised I'd give you this, so let me show you this. For those who watch this later or request a copy of this presentation, you'll have this, right? This is a way to kind of begin thinking about the search intent signals. Like if we're looking at informational, the how, the why, the when, the navigational, brand, company, product, things like that. Transactional, thinking about keywords that are related to buying and order and price and coupon purchase, commercial reviews and compare, and things of that nature. So this is kind of a little bit of a cheat sheet, but at the end of the day, what we really want to do is think about how are we nurturing each of these buckets. It's not a notion of pick one and own it. It's a notion of be there and connect with your audience in stride, in their journey where they are, and in a meaningful way, and ranking for those keywords in an intent perspective. All right, now, the next segment here is revving up content in a qualitative way, not quantitative. And I just want to say this. In the first segment, I spoke to the fact that it's not enough just to rank at the top of search, because you have to have that intent purpose behind it for it to be meaningful. But here's something else, and it's very important. If you do rank at the top of search, and if all of your efforts help you get there, really that's only part of the battle. The real battle is staying there. It's having consistency within maintaining your rankings. To do that, what we have to do is be mindful of those quality signals, your bounce rate, time on site, number of pages that people are looking at when they access your site, right? So a lot of times when we think about content, I see a lot of ticking of the box. Yes, we wrote some blog articles this month. Yeah, there's a new landing page that's up. But it's not about doing it for the sake of doing it. It's about doing it in a qualitative way so that we nurture all of the core metrics, and Google then rewards us with consistency in maintaining rankings. So that said, I'm going to start here. When we look at improving the content, we're going to be looking at things like titles and descriptions, heading tags, linking structures, images, and, well, blog posts and articles. So I'm going to get into each one of these, and I want to start purposefully with the title. The reason I'm starting with the title is because, well, when we rank in search, first of all, this title doesn't give context to the crawlers, but when we rank in search, we have a small window of time for people to consider us with all the other noise and things in the real estate, that is the search results. We need our title effective, because if we don't get them to click through, we're never going to hold and maintain our rankings. That CTR is critical. And we're also not being effective with the traffic that does see us. So how do you make your title effective? Well, think about the length. I can't tell you how many times I see that the length of the title is so long that there's, it gets truncated because it goes beyond what is allowed within that space. And then you just see dots. And when you see the dots, it can often impede the full context around what are you even trying to say. It's like you're communicating a sentence and you're cut off halfway through and you're just hoping people can figure out the end. Keywords are an important title, and we do want to make sure that we have them in there, and we can use separators to give easier visual clarity around kind of the value prop, the brand name, the keyword, those sorts of things. And then we also want to make sure that we're kind of taking a look at the competition, and that the title is relevant to what is being talked about within those queries. So the title is very, very important. But beyond the title, we also want to think about the description. These are the two segments, the two areas of content that really discern whether we win the war. In other words, do we get the click? Do we evoke a click? This is our chance to do just that. And are we serving the right relevant signals to the crawlers while we're doing that? So again, I start off with length. There's 160 characters here. You can see the dots that happen. If the length is too long, we get cut off. Google's not going to appreciate that because they know that we're being cut off, and that's not a great experience for the readers. The people who read it, the people who are searching aren't going to appreciate that because we're asking them, well, you figure out the rest. That's not a great way to start off. So you want to make the description easy to read, easy to understand, and frankly, think about it from the notion of, is it evoking a click? Is it built for engagement? And yes, you want the keywords, right? We want to be able to have this keyword ecosystem starting within this phase, and then it continues on. There's a soft landing on the page that people land on after they click on it, so that it continues that narrative. And the right way to do that, still thinking top down, is starting with the heading tags, right? On the page itself, we're thinking about the heading tags. I think we probably all know that you should only have one H1 tag. And if you don't know, that's okay. Now we all know we have one H1 tag. The thing of the H1 is if Google said to you, tell me the most important thing on the page. If I could know nothing else, what should I know? Well, the H1 tells them that. But if we have two, well, which one do they believe? It builds ambiguity. So make sure that we only have one of that. That the H1 also supports that segmentation. And frankly, this is a caveat that I don't have time to get into. The H1 is oftentimes being propagated now as the title and search results. Google's flipping them out. So beyond just thinking about a clear, concise H1, you really should think about whether that also evokes a click, almost like a secondary title. So the H1 is really important. Then we move into H2, H3s. Those header tags should support the narrative and give ancillary scaffolding around the H1 in the context of the page. So it's really important. Internal linking is also important. Okay, this is a segment where what we're doing with this internal linking is we're helping access more pages of our website, which, well, that gives us more pages per session. That gives us more time on site. Okay, and these are quality factors Google's looking at to see, did they serve the right search results to use? When they clicked, was it really what they were looking for? So we want to help nurture this deeper engagement, okay, within the site itself, time on site, interior pages, things of that nature. But it also gives us a chance to use a hyperlink anchor text. And so now, within that anchor text, it's serving signals back to Google around, this is a keyword, or this is a segment of the page that's also supported within the narrative, and it helps us nurture an overarching keyword ecosystem. So it's a way of us nurturing keywords while also, fortifying the time that people spend on the site, giving them a chance to get to know us better. And again, if we think about it in this dual segmentation, we're always thinking about how are we serving to Google, but also how are we simultaneously serving to the user, answering their questions, giving them value. Internal linking is certainly a key way to do just that. External linking is also important. Here again, we have a chance to nurture the anchor text, build in keyword relevance, build in contextual relevance, things of that nature, but it also builds credibility. If we're linking to external authoritative sources that are trustworthy, that's a nurturing factor, both sides of the fence, where we're showing we know what we're talking about, and maybe it's easy, or here's where our sentiments are echoed elsewhere in very trusted sources. So external linking, very, very important. All right, images in alt text. So here's the way that I think it's important to look at this. When us as people, humans, look at a web page, right? We see an image, we can infer. We can understand what is the image communicating and how is that relevant to what the content is. But think about it from Google's perspective. They're sending crawlers, right? Bots. They can't see the image. What do they see? They see the alt text. Even if they can kind of discern some segments of an image with some of their AI, they still don't have full contextual relevance. And that's what the alt text brings. It allows us to give the crawlers an understanding of this is what the picture is. This is how it relates to the content. And again, a keyword opportunity is certainly there, but the contextual relevance to fortify the strength of the page is definitively there. But it also gives us a chance to rank Google images. So it's just more opportunity for us. And so it's important to think through this. Very often I either see missing alt images or maybe the alts that came with the stock photos sometimes that have nothing to do with it. So it's important to consider that. All right, now remember, what we're talking about here really is this notion of quality over quantity, right? Qualitative lens. So let's take a look at qualitative factors. I mean, this isn't about let's try and do 10 blog articles a month or 20 blog articles a month. This is about maybe, depending on team size, bandwidth, etc., doing one every 2 weeks, but doing it well. Sometimes I speak to the notion of, and I probably should update this analogy, but I speak to the notion of if a tree falls over in the woods, nobody's around to hear it make a sound. Well, if your team creates content and it's fantastic, but it's long enough to rank or outrank the content that already exists in that space and nobody sees it, how valuable was it? So content needs to be developed and produced in a methodical way, in a strategic way, in a way that basically gives us confidence that it's going to outrank. It's going to outperform the content that already the same subject notion of what you're speaking about. So oftentimes for blog articles these days, we're seeing 13 to 1500 words per post, but we're also seeing that scheduling cadence matters, having a consistency to how and when you're posting, and that everything on the list that I've chatted about just beforehand, all those other titles, descriptions, H tags, things of that nature are used with this before it goes into publication. Now, there's also in-depth articles, and those articles, they do very, very well in search. They can range from 2,500 to 3,000 words. And these are really designed to increase user engagement. It's not just about text. It's also about asset. Could be images, could be videos. They're very in depth, and they cover a lot of usually both sides of the coin around whatever you're talking about, the pros and cons and comparisons of things of this nature. But people love it, and it's really great for engagement. Okay, now I mentioned the EAT and link acquisition to drive YMYL success. And I'd like to break this down first about what am I talking about, and then how do you do it? So let's start here. YMYL and EAT. A lot of times, you may not be very familiar with the acronyms, or maybe you are, but how do you nurture it? So that's what I want to look at. EAT, of course, is Google's algorithm, okay, for expertise, authority, and trust. And it's been around for a while. I mean, it first came out in 2018. It was named the Medic Update. It certainly has evolved since then. Any area where there needs to be expertise, authority, and trust, that could be things such as health, finance, and some other areas too, even education areas like that. But it goes beyond that. I'm going to show you which verticals in a moment. Anytime that there's a segment where trust is needed, we have to nurture the EAT algos. So some of the ways we're going to do that is outlinking to relevant, and authoritative sources, and including and making sure we're not anonymous. The topic and covering the topic in detail, like actually being thorough. So those are some of the main core components. Before we get into actually poll, I just want us to take a minute and look at as it relates to this notion around expertise, authority, and trust. So let me just bring up this poll, and I'm going to break it down and help us understand how can we better nurture it. Yeah, so at this time, are you managing the EAT, YMYL algorithms? So if you could just take talk about it. All right. So at this point, we can kind of get a sense that, around 42% were not aware that this needed to 42% were not aware this needed to occur. Some were not even aware of the algos at all. So that's kind of normal. This is what I hear most often. You do notice as well, though, that sometimes it's offsite only or onsite only, although I'm not seeing a lot of activity happening there, but it is somewhat common for that to be the case. All right, I'm going to show you what these algos are and how to nurture them. So as we look at that, let's talk about linking to authoritative sources first. EAT, building expertise, authority, and trust, is going to come from not only the things that you say, but areas in which can support what you're saying. If you use external linking to provide more information to the users, it shows a couple things. One, that maybe what you're saying is validated from other trusted sources, but also that you have performed research and that the research is available for everybody to see. So linking to trustworthy sites improves your value, your credentials, like the value of the article. Okay, it makes the article that you're linking to relevant. So we want to think about sources. And when we think about sources, we want to think about footnotes. A lot of times content either A, doesn't have footnotes, B, it has very few footnotes, or C, it may reference a footnote and then never actually have it at the bottom where it needs to live. Footnotes are great ways to fortify the content, build that expertise, authority, and trust, and Google certainly celebrates it. The other way is making sure that your author is named, that it's not anonymous. Whatever content you're writing, make sure there's a real person behind it. And it's nice if you do have like a little icon of somebody as well, meaning like their picture. But beyond just having a name, we really need a bio attached to that name. It's Google's thinking, okay, so you're talking about something, but who are you? And beyond who you are, why are you a trusted source within that realm. So we want to have a bio, and the bio needs to be built out. It should talk about their expertise, link to their education, link to resources, areas where they may have been published previously. A profile that's in their university, things of that nature. We've got to give depth to the author. But we also show expertise just in speaking in detail about the topic. So we really want to offer in-depth pieces. We want to think about, anytime we're talking about something, it's likely that our competitors have talked about it as well, or somebody is out there. And so we're not just going to be the only one in the space, right? So do some comp analysis, really look at what's ranking and what's missing from within that content. Do what others are doing, but do it better. And make sure that all your sources are true and relevant. You have to make sure that those links are pointing to places that are trusted. Now, YMYL. Really important that we nurture it. Well, the first question is, who does that apply to? More than you think. Obviously, news and current events and government and law. I think we could all attest that, government law, finance, health, all things, right? But here's where it starts getting really interesting. I don't know often that the folks understand that shopping flows through the YMYL algo, purchases of goods and services. It also gets into groups of people, and my favorite, other. Other is ambiguous. If it affects many more than you would think, brands, websites, things of that nature. Education's a big one. You talked about often, but you see here choosing a college, yeah, but also beyond that, things like tutoring and classes and online learning, things like that. So it probably folds through you or close to you. So EAT starts to help you nurture and build into this, right? And actually serve into the YMYL, but it's more than that. You also should use link acquisition to build additional, domain authority, your domain rating, the trust and authority of the site as a whole. If you're nurturing EAT and supporting it with strong domain authority, now you can actually help not only satisfy, but propel yourself through the YMYL algorithm. So a way to look at this is having your backlinks, for example, organic outreach, really connecting with editors, and garnering link acquisition on thematically relevant sites that point to you. And those sites need to have strong domain authority, strong page authority. They need to have low spam scores, right? They should have good citation flow, trust flow. When you obtain that fingerprint now is imparted onto your website. Your trust and authority goes up. You can see this lower graph in the lower right corner. This is literally, a client kind of DA, that domain authoritative journey that's been happening. And you can see that as the inbound links and trust and authority come through and do follow capacity, domain authority goes up. And when your trust and authority go up, here's what's happening. What you're saying on your website is what people are saying about you offsite. And when those two come together in concert, success. That's success. So the next part of all of this really is, okay, so what how do we crystallize this in a way that's effective? And I think about this as the simple secret, which is your consistency. So let's take a look at that for a moment. Here's something interesting. It's not really depicted here, but I did hear John Mueller recently. Somebody asked him, John Mueller, by the way, search advocate with Google. What is the secret to SEO? And I thought, gosh, how do you answer that? What is the secret to SEO? But he did it brilliantly, and he just said consistency. And then here's like a Twitter, you can see, you can see in this thread, John Mueller says, hey, with a trailing slash, it has no effect. Just pick one format, use it consistently. And then he said again, SEO lives and dies with consistency. Well, consistency where? How? Well, okay. So content. This isn't about, hey, let's do 30 blogs and see what happens. Like publish 20, 30 blogs, then wait a few months and see if it helped you. This is more about publish a blog every couple of weeks and do it consistently for the next 6 months and then continue thereafter too. Consistency with keyword usage, and I'm going to show you a deeper slide about that in a moment. Consistency in the architecture of the website, consistency in the NAP, that name, address, phone number, consistency, right? And consistent link velocity. I can't tell you how many times I talk to, well, a lot of people, SEOs, brands, companies, who are saying, well, you know what I did? I'm going to build 50 links. I need 300 links. That ends up looking like a needle on the record, meaning when you look at it analytically, there isn't a consistency. There's a jagged movement up, and often thereafter a jagged movement down. Google doesn't like that. In fact, that looks very manipulated. So what we should be doing is 1 or 2 backlinks every week, all the time, kind of thing. It's a consistent approach, and that's where success really, breeds into your site and your rankings. So when we think about content and we think about consistency, what we think about is a cadence, having an actual, date and time in which you typically publish content. It's great. Google loves that, but also, people love that. They begin to start to look to your site on certain dates because they know that you're going to have something new at that point in time. Consistency in your quality, not generating low quality content because you in your mind thought, I need to have 5 blog articles this month and I only have 3. Boy, I better just whip out 2 more quickly. You have to stay consistent within your quality as well, and then also your messaging, your brand messaging, that value prop, that voice, it needs to remain consistent. So you can content calendars, brand guidelines for the voice, checklists to ensure consistency, things of this nature, but content needs to be consistent. Keywords need consistency too, all the way from the top down, like we talked about, right? I also have found that consistency within keywords, and we'll talk about this in a moment, is a cross-pollination, meaning we should be seeing it in your PR. We should be seeing it in your paid search. We should be seeing it in your social media captions. There needs to be consistency in your keyword ecosystem. But from a page level, that means from the URL on down, the title, description, H1, all things we talked about, consistency. Consistency within your architecture is also critical. Everything from your navigation to the information you're providing and the internal linking structure, which bolts it all together and helps people, can navigate through your site with cohesion, with an efficiency that is exceptionally important as well. So we definitely want to think about consistency across those segments. And I mentioned earlier that we would talk again about NAP, this NAP, right? Or some people say NAPU, because it's the name, address, phone number, and your URL. I'll just hit kind of briefly here, but I just wanted to mention that with consistency in the NAP, basically what you propagate on your website needs to have cohesion offsite. So that means, if you have your name, address, and phone number, and then we take a look at Google Maps, we take a look at Yelp or different places, and there's a different address, or it's missing the suite number, or the phone number is different, or the hours are different. If you don't have cohesion within the NAP about your company, that can be actually a pretty large concern for Google. And so we want to make sure consistency from top to bottom, putting that people find us within the directories, those citations. All right. I also want to take a moment and I want to chat about cohesion. This is very important. Now, when we think about cohesion, I mentioned it earlier. We want to have a clear dotted line between who your website should be serving to. So in other words, people are asking questions all day long on Google search about a great many things. And Google's trying to find out who should they serve as the proper voice and answer and solution to the query. So if you are involved, let's say, in dentistry, and you're talking about, psychology or maybe architect or telecommunications, it starts to become ambiguous. It starts to dilute your voice and topic. That doesn't mean that dentists only need to talk about dentistry, but what that does mean is that they should talk about dentistry most often. And if they're not, that's okay too. But the same ecosystem of keywords that we're nurturing in other places should have a rhyme and reason and consistency and cohesion within that content. In other words, help Google find you. Don't just try and be everything to everybody. I think if there's If there's only, and yeah, and by the way, I am speaking about Google, but in my mind too, frankly, when I say Google, yeah, I'm talking about a multitude of these top search engines, Bing and things of that nature. So many of them follow Google in the way that they approach their algos. And so if we're serving best practice to Google, for the most part, you're also going to be doing yourself a very big favor in these other search engines as well. So anyway, but so be consistent and then build in cohesion. About isn't trying to be everything to everybody, but rather is being a bit more specific to your industry, vertical, niche. That will also help you in the segmentation of EAT because you're building thought leadership. You're building a voice that's very vertical specific. And it also helps cut through all this noise. What we're seeing here is noise. It's real, it's search, and we need to cut through that so we can help Google serve you more cleanly to your intended user. Now, how do you do it? How do you do it? Keyword research, I would say this is a very prime epicenter and a great opportunity to understand how we're going to give that clear dotted line to Google for the topics back to you. Competitive analysis, right? Looking, I think about this 80-20 rule a lot. I talk about it a bit because if we look at it, 80% of the value that's happening to you in most anything that you're doing, quite frankly, but for now, we'll talk about organic search, is going to come from 20%, let's say, of the keywords that you're servicing or 20% of the pages that are on your site. So let's take a look at the competitors and better understand from them what's working for them and what's not. Where are they garnering their traffic related to you in your industry and your vertical, where maybe you don't even have a voice in that narrative yet. So competitive analysis is so critical. Page element optimization, we've talked a lot about that today. So obviously making sure that Google can understand the page, understand the keywords, right? Those sorts of things, and have a clear lens, that very clear topic focus from the H1, those sorts of things. The thematic keyword selection, that's very important too. And of course, keyword mapping. I just want to take a moment on that. I think it's so important to look at this keyword mapping because so often we find that there is cannibalization. And it's you're creating noise within your own ecosystem here. So what I mean by that is if you have multiple pages and blogs and articles, different things that are all trying to rank for the same keyword, you're really working against yourself. What we want to do is map those keywords to the very specific pages, and we can, from a semantic perspective, support them in ancillary content and make sure the internal linking structure is properly set up to support them. But we want to have a clear line of keyword map to page. And the semantic theme, contextual analysis, again, this cuts through the noise, right? We want to speak about things, but we don't want to just think about content. We actually want to think about context. So, and that also, by the way, propagates into the social media platforms. It's great to nurture your captions with keywords and things of that nature, but just be sure, whatever platform you're serving, that the content you're providing has context within how users digest the information. We talked about the purchase intent analysis. That's one intent, right? I kind of go straight to the right there with the thematic keyword picking. It's great to also think about the keywords in that intent stage and how it nurtures the funnel. And that's why I say, take a look at that at a glance slide, that sheet slide. Really understand when you're creating content, you're not just doing it for the sake of creating the content, but you're doing it with a methodology in mind. And part of that methodology should be what stage of the funnel you're nurturing, what intent bucket are you nurturing as well. And then obviously just standardized keyword analysis, right? So really just taking a look at the core keywords that are critical to your brand, your service, your product, your company, your value proposition, and then building out silos. We build a lot of silos because once we have that keyword universe built out and it's broken into silos, anytime you go to write content, whether it's for PR, paid search, social, content like blogs on page, things like that, you can look at your silos and say, okay, today I'm writing about this. Here's the silo for that subject matter that I need to nurture. And you can reach into your bag, pull out the keywords that matter and map to that content. And now you're staying in the keyword ecosystem. So I think it's very, very important that you use this type of approach so that you cut through the noise and make it very, very clean and obvious to Google who you should be served to. But there's one other final component that I want to speak to today, and that is the cross-pollination. Okay, so I've mentioned it a couple of times, but here you can kind of get a better perspective on it, right? When you're nurturing search engine optimization, you're really trying to finesse your rankings, garnering impression share, massaging your click-through rate, and you're really working through SEO in a meaningful way for you and your brand and company. What's going to happen is you're going to have some wins. Things are going to start to work, and maybe not everything, and that's fine too. But when they do begin to work, what we want to know from that is how do we leverage that data to help it work, as it were, in other places. So we'll start to see, wow, these particular keywords are working very well. And whatever those keywords are and how you define working very well, it could mean people utilize these keywords and we find that they're more transactional, they're more goal, they support APIs better, maybe they're downloading products more, they're for newsletters, and we start to see those wins. We start to see not only where Google sees our relevance and is propagating our visibility, but in addition to that, which ones are most effective, which ones are driving our KPIs. So now when you have that information, the question is, are you cross-pollinating it? Are you pushing it over to the PR that you're doing? If you're sending press releases or otherwise, are you moving it into your social media channels? Right? When you have your paid search, campaigns, are you helping to fortify the effectiveness of those campaigns through what you have found in organic search? And likewise, when you're building your domain authority, it goes beyond just getting a link. What anchor are they using? Obviously, not every anchor is going to be, exact match. Some of it's going to be, branded or naked URL and things, and that's normal and natural and healthy. But sometimes you do want categorical, value prop, exact match anchors, and you should be folding into the data that you discerned that's priority from your organic search. And I think it's very important to cross-pollinate. Now, it's very easy also to reverse this and say, okay, paid search as an example, which keywords are working the best, are performing the best, which keywords are driving. When we think about the qualitative and the quantitative, we can think about it here just the same. There are learnings happening in the paid segmentation that should be being nurtured over to the organic search. If you have an SEO team, in-house or otherwise, there should be a lot of cross collaboration happening, so that the paid team is talking to organic and their search team is talking to paid and over to social media. Social media sometimes is sharing their content calendars. Here's the captions. Is there anything I can do to help nurture any of this, keywords or the pages that we're trying to build, additional PA like page authority to and different things of that nature. It's really important that there's cross-pollination and that we're taking the learnings and the areas that are going to really drive our business forward, and we're using it in all of these segments. Or the last thing I want to say about this is organic search is great from the perspective that we can get a lot of feedback from Google. Okay, so whether that's just looking at our rankings to see where Google supports what we're doing and where they don't, whether we're looking at Google Search Console and we're getting a plethora of data from there, right? Google Search Console, there's just so much we can extrapolate back. We're not just talking to there. We're kind of seeing back performance and metrics and errors and like Core Web Vital page performance and sitemaps and all these different things. So it's important that we're looking at this information, and when we have all those learnings, not just to let it live in one silo, but to also help propagate. And there's learnings in all of these other silos too, and they should break out of their silos. So all of that said, I have one last that I would like to do, and here it is. Do you cross-pollinate your SEO efforts with other channels? And there's no, this isn't, you're not going to be judged, but the question is just really posed around the idea of how much of this information are you taking and sharing one way or back to another? And I'll give us a moment to take a look at that. Okay. Yeah. Great. Great. Well, it's nice to see this. I like this, the results on this from what I'm seeing already. And the reason why is that it spans the full spectrum. It's, we have some individuals who do use the organic and paid, and that's fantastic. Others don't, but they do have a plan in place, and that's amazing as well. And some don't, but they want to, but they don't have a plan yet. And here's what just to kind of wrap this up. The last thing I want to say about this is that you know you want to take what the information you have and leverage it as cleanly as possible to propel your company. And there's so much information within cross pollination that can do just that. We as a team here, we often use link acquisition, whether that's garnering like links within curated lists, press outreach, things like that, or just standard high DA link acquisitions. Those anchors should be driving the trust and authority of the site. And what we want to do is build into the anchors that are most transactional or most driven to the KPIs. PR is another. When there's press releases that go out, you can inject a link. You should do that mindfully, and we should be using the data. So think about the cross pollination. So I know we talked about a lot today, right? We talked about intent, and of course, EAT, YMYL, all sorts of things, cohesion, consistency. So I'm just going to wrap this up here and just say that if you'd like to get a copy of this presentation so you could digest it a bit more slowly and at your leisure and reflect back, please feel free. You can send an email to support at strategicsEOsolutions.com, and we'll send that to you quickly. You're also welcome just to reach out to us, send us the email, give us a call. You can even schedule right through the calendar on the site and get on a call with me and the team and chat about it further. We're happy to. I know I've seen that there's been quite a few questions that have been coming through. Thank you for that. I know we don't have a lot of time. We'll try and get to a couple, but we don't have a lot of time to go through them now. But I am happy to revert back and answer questions post the webinar as well. So thank you all. Thank you for your time. And again, honestly, please feel free to reach out at your convenience.
Thank you so much, John. We do have a lot of questions, so we'll get through a couple of them. And like you said, if we don't get to your questions, we'll be sure to pass them along to John. So first up, we have from Nancy on using alt text for SEO results. What if our corporate accessibility guidelines calls for us to use alt text for images to describe for unsighted users what the image shows?
Well, that's a great question. My mind was kind of reeling for a moment around the notion of, well, where your question might go. And the reason why I say that is well, first, let me answer your question. So yeah, the unsighted users, the truth of the matter is when it comes to alt text, the best practice is always to just give value around what the image is about. I mean, to be mindful of it, to be real and authentic to the image. So describe the image, certainly. But then to add on additional texture to that image when to support your keyword ecosystem. So you can describe what the image is about, but just make sure in that description, when possible, you don't want it to necessarily feel forced in any way, shape, or form. But typically, if the image is thematic to the subject matter, if it's contextual, it should be thematically contextual to your keyword ecosystem as well. So I would say hitting both of those targets with one alt is the right way to go. I just want to caveat real quick for those who might be wondering this. I can't tell you how many times, I talk to companies who say, well, hey, with the alt text, we have a compliance department, like a legal team needs to look at this. It could be that way for the descriptions and things as well. But just remember, some of this is kind of forward facing, meaning if we put a title in a description or even just verbiage on a page, that's forward facing. People will see it. They'll see it. Search results will see it on the page. Some of the information isn't forward facing, meaning Google can crawl it and see it, but that doesn't mean that people can crawl it and see it. So alts is one of those ways where for those who need the visual assistance, they're going to see it, right? And so it's important that you do think through the notion of, is what I'm writing going to also, convey real context to the person who can't see it, but is it also helping to support, a keyword segmentation, or at least a variety of that keyword? It could be a semantic partner. So I would try and merge them both, but also be aware of the fact that there are certain ways to lay keywords into parts of your website where, Well, people just won't often, if ever, see it. And so, but Google will. And so there's times to think about it in both sides of that coin.
Great. Thanks, John. We have another question. This one from Kyle. In your opinion, is there a case to be made for educating and empowering your content team on SEO best practices? Or do you think that the job function is more isolated to a specific title or team?
Yeah. Well, okay. That's a great question. Thank you. Here's the real answer. The real answer is it comes down, frankly, for many companies to budget and bandwidth. The right way to do it is I always see content as an art and a science. The art is writing the content, and those writers have that art and that gift. The science is the SEO segmentation to it. And I find it's often best this is the way we do it. First, we can even help content teams ideate topics. But let's say your team has come up with topics, fine. Somebody should help them with what I call scaffolding. So we typically create a content brief that shows, well, again, this backs into, it's not enough to just create content. Make sure it's going to rank or outrank, right? So how do you do that? So like our briefs have things like, well, how many words should it be? So usually what we're doing as a team is we're taking the top 10, 15 results within search related to the topic and bubbling up through all that data, the similarities that are helping them to rank. So how many words should it be? How many subheadings should it be? How many assets? Do we need images? Do we need videos? What are the PAA questions that should be part of this? What is the core keyword and what are the semantic partners? And so oftentimes what we do is we provide that. Okay, the writers can now have some, if it's bowling, it's like those bumper lanes, right? They can do what they do and be free to write, but they have some guidance and direction signs. Then they create what they create. Then usually it goes back to the SEO teams, and the SEO teams look at it and say, great, I understand the user who reads this is going to be able to infer great value out of this, but will Google be able to also see it just cleanly? Sometimes it's just about adjusting maybe a keyword density because maybe it accidentally went too far. It's over. It's too dense, or maybe it wasn't included at all, or maybe it's just shifting like an H2 to an H3 or an H4 to an H2. So there's the scientific notion around the structural capacity that the SEOs really should do. And so I think that is, and then it can go, and frankly, to be transparent as quickly, it should then go on the back end of the site, saved as a draft. We should so that we see the coding and make sure it's all lined up. We don't have the duplicate H1s and 2s and things. We don't see any other issues. And then it goes to production. So it should be this, this collaboration. If you don't have that, I like your question from the perspective of minimally, having some training would help, because without it, well, how do we know the content is going to outrank? How do we know it's going to perform? We have to have that methodology going into it, or coming out of it, it's just random results.
Great. Thanks, John. I think we have time for one more question. From Katie, how many times would you recommend including the keyword in the body content of a blog per number of words in the article?
That answer used to be really easy to say. It's changed now. And so pardon me if this seems a little bit tangent. I only have 2 minutes, so good news, it'll end before that. It depends. It really depends for every single article or page that you write, because depending upon how competitive that content is, and depending upon what signals Google is using to rank that content. For certain content, keywords are really, you can see epicenter to Google's determination about how they rank that piece. For others, that is not what they're using. They're using more of the EAT signals. They're using more of that trust and authority. They're using more of the domain authority. They're using more of kind of some of the schema elements and some of the visual assets to support the keywords and support the thematic subject matter. So, for us as a team, before we make that determination, we do what I was just speaking to, which is we take a look at like the top 10, top 15 ranked sites for a specific keyword, and we lay them on top of each other. We look at what's happening within that lens to gauge what is Google valuing from those pages that we would need to then support to actually help us rank. And that changes for every single keyword. That's the right way to do it. So sometimes we have to be stronger in our keyword density. And sometimes we have to be softer, but instead support other elements. And that's really what's going to be strategically the right way to approach ranking.
All right, John, thank you so much. Again, if you would like a copy of the slide deck, just send an email to support@strategicseosolutions.com. Thanks again to John for your engaging presentation. And if we did not get to your question, we will be sure to pass it along to him. On behalf of Search Engine Land, I want to thank everyone in our audience for attending today's webinar, and we hope you join us again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.